Hello, everyone. My name is Mehta. I'm a Science Communication Intern at EarthScope Consortium, and I'll be interviewing Alex Mita. She's also a Science Communication Intern at EarthScope Consortium, and she's also an undergraduate from the University of Georgia, and she's studying marine sciences, specializing in polar marine science and also in glacier dynamics. So, Alex, my first question is, how did you get into studying marine science?
So it's really been a lifelong interest, which I think is a super cliche answer. But the first thing I remember wanting to be when I grew up was a dolphin trainer. So I think it's a sort of maintained the same trajectory throughout my life. I've always loved the ocean. Growing up, every time my family would be near it, I'd love the time there. And then, of course, once you actually get through high school and college, you realize this is something you can actually do as a career. Um, and I lived in Georgia throughout high school, so when I realized that the University of Georgia had a marine sciences degree, because not a lot of schools do, I thought, well, that settles it, then that's what I'll do. Um, of course, I didn't know what specifically I wanted to do with it until I got to college. But yeah, the last 3 or 4 years have been like just great for figuring out what it is about the field that I actually like, what interests me, and just sort of fostering that lifelong interest still.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Also, what part of marine sciences interests you the most?
So, what interests me the most and what I do my undergraduate research on is specifically polar marine science, even more specifically, how climate change affects pretty much everything in specifically Arctic ecosystems. So, I started out last year by looking at a project where I wanted to see how sort of like longitudinal climate driven changes, like increased temperatures, increased glacial melt, affected the ecology of certain fish populations off the coast of Western Greenland. So seeing like how potentially increased glacial melt, how increased temperatures, and all of the like subsequent factors um, affected where certain fish populations that are vital to the Greenland's fishing industry were more likely to be. And then for the last sort of 6 months, I shifted to doing a more geological, geophysical approach to this. So seeing how that increased glacial melt affected circulation and like sedimentation processes, and basically what water masses are where in that same um, bay. I was focusing on like a specific bay on Western Greenland. So seeing how basically how the physics was changing in that fjord system in that bay.
Wow, it's really interdisciplinary, your research project. I like how you impact the environment, and I like that your contribution is very important for public outreach as well. So, that given, like, how important is to study glacier dynamics, and what is the importance of communicating the science that you do to the public? Because it's very important for people to know about your research in order for other people to get interested as well.
So on a very, very broad scale, I mean, everybody, but at this point has at least heard about climate change. Like that's not so much, at least in the scientific community, it's not so much a new issue anymore. But what I find the challenge and also the importance to be is connecting like the super, super broad ideas of climate change that the general public has to more specific cases like this. Like when people think climate change, they don't think this specific fish population will move to a different location in this specific area in Greenland, right? Sort of bridging that gap and understanding like every step along the way that makes that happen, and subsequently the importance of that is where I find the importance is, and what I find most of, yeah, what I value the most. So, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with science communication. I think um, climate science, climate change related fields is probably the most reliant on science communication out of any other discipline of science because of how often polarizing it can be, no pun intended. Um, like I think it's only in the last few years that we've moved past the point of most people saying, "Oh, it's a hoax. So it's not going to happen in our lifetime." But I realize, like, yes, it is going to happen in our lifetime. It's already happening, and this is the science that backs that up. So just bridging the gaps between like the research that gets put out and the general public's super broad ideas, and understanding how we can best bridge that gap.
I full on agree. It's really important for people to know how important it is and the power that we have to change what is known to us. Because sometimes many people don't really know about what goes on in our climate, what goes on in our environment. And Greenland is so interesting. So, by the way, do you have any current
At
undergraduate
least for the
research
rest of this year, I
projects
do
that
plan
you're
to
looking
continue
forward
with
to in
the
Greenland?
project that I've been doing so far. Um, I'm going to be spending a semester at the Georgia coast at the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography this fall, and I'm really, really looking forward to meeting new, really amazing researchers and figuring out how to like best move forward. Especially because this is my last year of undergraduate, my last year of my undergraduate degree, so figuring out where I want to go to grad school, where can I best, where would my efforts best be put into. Um, Sorry, that's a super vague answer. Point is, I don't know any more details than that. It's all kind of up in the air right now.
No worries. When I was an undergrad, I had the same journey. So it's kind of a profound journey that you have towards like what are your future plans. So it's perfectly fine if it's up in the air. It's perfectly fine if it's still developing itself. As long as you feel passionate about what you study, you'll get there. So
Yeah, and
no need to worry.
honestly, that's been a good comfort to me because like I realized that I'm so lucky that I know exactly what I want to do and that I have such a passion for like it's more I know what my end goal will be, so I only need to figure out how to get there instead of having to figure out what I want my end goal to be. So I feel very privileged in that sense.
You have your North Star. So it's
Exactly.
only
That's
the
that's great.
trajectory. Yeah, it's only the trajectory towards getting there is what you're trying to figure out, but you'll get there. I believe in you, you'll get there.
Thank you.
So, what other hobbies do you have aside from studying polar marine science, which is, by the way, really interesting?
So I guess the first and foremost one is not very different at all. I'm really, really interested in polar history, um, the Arctic and the Antarctic, but the Arctic in particular is a very, very historically rich area. It's some of it's an example of some of like the best and the worst parts of humanity. We have such brilliant examples of conservation practices, sustainable fishing practices throughout history by the indigenous peoples. But also we have like more perfect examples of the effects of colonialism, specifically like the British Navy, and I like history, so all that together there, plus with my science interests. So I spend a lot of time reading and watching documentaries and all that. But outside of that, because I do have a life outside of that, I'm really big into music. I play a lot of instruments, and I do art. And yeah,
The best of both worlds, art and science. I like it. I really do like it. So, most importantly, like, how did you find out about the EarthScope Consortium career intern paths? And what inspired you specifically for the science communication intern position? And what is your passion behind it? Like, what interests you mostly about being a science communication intern? I know I asked you three questions in one.
it's okay. Um, so well, to start out logistically, how I found it is I was actually looking for specifically a science communication internship. So it wasn't like EarthScope first and then science communication. It was science communication first and then EarthScope was one of the first that I ended up finding, because I really wanted to focus on some of the the hard skills, like research skills that I had worked on the last year, and then adding that to more like soft, like social educational skills. Um, this sort of answers the next part of the question. So I've worked as a tutor for 5-ish years now, and I mostly do science and math with my students. And and for the last year or so, I've been thinking, okay, I have to find a way to combine these two things because I'm passionate about climate education. So, what's the best way I can get experience in educating, but also maintaining that hard science component? And I figured something like this was the absolute best way to do that. Um, and as for I think the third part was what I most like about science communication. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Um, um, it's really just getting the chance to help people learn. I love teaching, um, and I mean, especially about science, and just being able to sort of foster the same like excitement about the world around you that I had when I was growing up. To be able to like help that grow in a child or even another adult, I think is like one of the best experiences in the world. So yeah, that's what I like most about it.
It is. I also love teaching and seeing the way a child sees it. It inspires you even to do a lot better and to hone your skills, like to learn your
So,
skills a lot better. In order to explain like a very difficult concept to in layman's terms, that is the best skill that you can achieve here in science communication. Well, at least for me, that's what I'm learning to do,
no,
right?
absolutely. I was last. This is a bit of an anecdote, but last year I was teaching chemistry at the same time I was taking organic chemistry. Like I know, no, no, high school chemistry, organic chemistry, very different. But I was realizing as I was teaching that, oh, that's what that actually means. Oh, this is what I can do in my own work. Like everything makes sense now. Um, so I firmly believe that nobody stops learning until their very last day on Earth. So we have a responsibility to teach, but also to keep learning ourselves, and I think everything kind of goes hand in hand.
I always have like this theme of mine throughout, my undergrad and being a grad student, and it's like we never stop learning, and when you are able to teach, a teacher is born. I had a professor of mine told me that once, and it's very true. Very
Mhm.
true.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what advice would you give to undergraduates and for high school students that would like to study geoscience or any STEM related field?
So being not too closely related to geoscience, I have to speak a bit more broadly. But I would say, first of all, for undergrads, especially if it's your first or second year in college, talk to everyone, apply to everything. No door is closed. I think I realized personally, a bit too late in my undergraduate career that a lot of internships and really sort of like scary opportunities are actually targeted towards first and second years. And then by that time, I've already sort of missed the boat on that. But just apply to everything, even if you think it's a long shot. Talk to everybody. Talk to every professor you've ever had. And of course, not everyone will, you'll not get along 100% with everybody, but just meet as many people as you can and just like take the most you can out of what college has to offer or even what high school has to offer. I mean, there's a surprising amount that you can do still in high school. And I'm not saying, you have to get like a crazy test scores. I mean, just do things that you love and figure out what you love as soon as you can, because then you get to keep doing it for as long as you want. And that's a gift.
I full on agree. Like, I'm a very peculiar student, right? Because I did have A's and B's in my core classes, but in the classes that complement my bachelor's degree, I struggled a bit with it. However, as a master's student, I went into the geophysics side, which is like very heavy on math and very heavy in physics, which, by the way, were both of the subjects as an undergrad that I most struggled in. However, since it's it's very peculiar, right? But since I do enjoy it and I do love it, I practice, I always ask my advisors, and I always talk to everybody. Networking is such an important skill to have, specifically when you are an early career scientist or when you're a grad student, undergrad, and a high school student. There is no door closed, and you only need one yes in order for one door to
Exactly.
open the next one and the
Yep.
next one. So I do
Yeah,
agree with your advice.
and actually, that reminded me of something that I'll add on to it quickly. So, I'd also say don't be afraid to take opportunities that are slightly different than what you would think you'd want. For example, I think this must have been 2 years ago now, maybe last year. I worked in a bird flu lab for like 8, 9 months, which is totally different from anything I do now. But I got like some great and kind of crazy hands-on experiences. I mean, I'd never think I'd work with even influenza and like live chickens and ducks, but I did. I just accepted it and I did it, and that gave me such amazing like hands-on skills and um, more general lab practices that you can apply to everywhere else. Um, so just yeah, take every opportunity you can, even if it's not what you think you'll like, because you'll learn something from it no matter what.
Oh, that's pretty neat. And I think it gives you a pretty neat perspective on like research also and doing things that are very different to your field. I remember before going into like geology, I did like animal biotechnology internship as a high school student, and that really nurtured my mind as a researcher, as how to do research, how to plan your research, like critical thinking. So even though it's very far from what you study or what you specialize in or what you want to specialize in, like anything is very good for you in order to nurture your mind, like broaden your mind. And maybe in the future you could collaborate and do an interdisciplinary research with the people that you did in the bird flu lab. So I always say to undergraduate students, apply to everything.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
So, Alex, thank you very much for this lovely interview. I wish you the very best in your endeavors. Never get discouraged, and your journey will be great as an undergrad towards a grad student journey. And I
Thank you so
hope,
much.
of course, and I hope you really have fun at the EarthScope Consortium being a science communication intern.
Thank you.
Of course.